ladies and gentlemen, it's Martha Novak. So glad to talk with you today. My name is Martha Burgess Novak, and we're here to do the show Real Talk with Martha Burgess Novak. Ladies and gentlemen, we are on Blog Talk Radio currently, live and in person. Our phone number is 347-850-1647 if you'd like to talk to me directly. We are also on Facebook Live, and we hope you're tuning into that. There is easy access to our, thank you, there's easy, we're just trying to keep the animals out of the show today. There's easy access to either of these venues on our new name for our website, which is Martha Novak. That's Martha, Novak.com. We are now a .com. We are so glad that you're watching today, and thank you so much for doing so. We are now talking about the next lesson in our series on being happy and what that entails, and I do think we have some interesting things to say today. We'll have a little bit of repeat, but not a lot, and hopefully we will all learn some new information that we can apply. I want to tell you that next week, I don't know when you'll be listening to the show. Hopefully you'll go back and listen to the show again in archives, because it is archived on Blog Talk Radio, on Facebook Live, and on YouTube. Everything that we do on Blog Talk Radio and Facebook Live goes immediately to YouTube. So you can find all of our past shows there. And there are a lot of them on all sorts of different subjects. So we hope you'll investigate those things. I'm going to take next week off if you do watch this live and in person, because next week is Thanksgiving. And I'd like to have all that time to certainly do some personal work, but also to give thanks for my wonderful life and for yours, by the way. So why don't we do a prayer right now, pardon me, while I choke, and then we'll go into our subject. Keep in mind, you can talk to me today, 347-850-1647. That is a line that puts you directly on the air. So if you don't want to be on the air, we hope you will go through our website, marthanovak.com, and come into the show a different way than live and in person, although I'm delighted to talk with you personally. Let's do a prayer, get us all on the same page, and then we'll launch off into our work. Dear God, who is all there is, you who are all we are, and all everything is in this world, and we thank you so much for this life, this day, this becoming. What are we becoming? We are becoming more of who we are authentically, beyond the cognitive distortions, radio show on that, beyond what we try so hard to be. We are all going into a sincere comfort and peace with who we are, as we know more and more that you are all we are, except for these distortions that we made in our childhood. Dear God, help us know there's nothing wrong with them. They are to be moved through, though. And we dedicate ourselves now to knowing more and moving through them and working ourselves into the present time where we can be fully aware of you. The you through us and through all things. We say this prayer now, along with our surrendering, knowing anything. For it is the you through us and through all things that know it all. Thank you, dear God, for this. We're listening, and so it is. Amen. So we continue our series, How to Be Happy. I referred to cognitive distortions in our in our prayer. And there's a whole series on that, not just one show. I heard that come out of my mouth. I thought I better correct it. So you can listen to that. There is a lot of repeat because I felt very strongly. You know, I have a great litmus test because I teach a class, and if I see people struggling over some issues and being very confronted by them, I'll go back and repeat myself, which I did on that radio show, on those series too, but I think it's important. Now, very little repeat today. I read books, I read articles, I do my homework on these subjects at hand. You keep in mind I'm very different from other authors because my end result is consciousness. It is not appealing to necessarily the masses, although I certainly hope to more and more as the world wakes up. But my end result is I'm wanting you to wake up in consciousness, and anything that I feel that I or other people have written is very important to that process, particularly when they have something unique to say. Now, what I often do is I'll take their articles or their books and I'll translate it into our language, which is consciousness, through the triad of awareness, consciousness to enlightenment. That's what we do here. So I think a very interesting book to me has been written by Dr. Martin Seligman, S-E-L-I-G-M-A-N. He's a PhD. And if you're interested in reading more about what I'm talking about, you might want to get his book, Authentic Happiness, which I'm going to take a lot of what we're going to talk about today from. He's written another book, which I think was his first book, called Learned Optimism. I'm not sure why I'm not quite as fond of that book as I am this book. Perhaps this book is more focused, Authentic Happiness. I'm not sure, but there is a accessibility to this book that I did not find in the first book. All right. So with all due respect and honor of Dr. Seligman, I'd like to talk about that today in terms of the work you do on yourself for happiness. And we're going to talk about consciousness as well. I think, ladies and gentlemen, you might want to get a pen and paper now. But, oh, good morning, Bill. And he says, good morning, everyone. That's so sweet of you. Thank you for listening. So here's where I'm going with what I just said. Get a pen and paper, because some of these concepts are very confusing. They're just confusing in the way these things are said, but it can be said no better way than the way Dr. Seligman is saying them. I want you to be able to write some of these things down. I will repeat a sentence or two here and there so you can, because these things require change of mind, of what comes out of your mouth. It's based on what's going through your mind, right? And if you are going to have every advantage, you need to have this as conscious thought. Now, I think it's extremely important to write those things down, to cogitate on these things so they're forefront in your mind. I'm not going to see you for 2 weeks. I'm going to take next Sunday off, which is Thanksgiving, the day after of the during the Thanksgiving holidays. But I'll see you in 2 weeks, and I'd love to know how you do with some of the challenges that I'm going to present today for you. I think that we're all on the same page with you wanting to be happier. It's the human condition. But there are a lot of things we're doing that are in our way of that. And I'm going to present 1 or 2 of them today so that you may be more aware of what you're doing that is not making you happy, so we can change that. So I'm going to give you a line right now that comes directly from Dr. Seligman. And this is a perfect example of what I'm talking about. It's a little confusing, And part of it's confusing because the sentence is confusing, and part of it's confusing because it really pretty much confronts what we're doing. And if we're not ready to be confronted with what we're doing, we go, whoa, what'd she say? Confusion's a wonderful thing, but it is actually a device that we use to keep ourselves from deeper truths and change. So here's the sentence. Finding permanent and universal causes of good events, along with temporary and specific causes for misfortune, is the art of hope. I'm going to repeat that, and then I have another one right behind this, another sentence that is equally hard. Okay, ready? Finding permanent and universal causes of good events, along with temporary and specific causes for misfortune, is the art of hope. One more time. Finding permanent and universal causes for good events, along with temporary and specific causes for misfortune, is the art of hope. All right, moving along. And I'm going to explain these in just a minute, although I think I've explained this pretty well last week. You'll have to tell me. And we're going to give you some examples in just a moment today of these two sentences. I'm about to give you the second one. Here we go. Finding permanent and universal causes for misfortune, and temporary and specific causes for good events, is the practice of despair. Let me repeat. Finding permanent and universal causes for misfortune, and temporary and specific causes of good events, is the practice of despair. One more time. Finding permanent and universal causes for misfortune, and temporary and specific causes of good events, is the practice of despair. When we talk about being happy, we have to discuss the habitual things that make us unhappy that we're not even aware of, or we wouldn't do them. These two sentences contain a great deal of why everyone is unhappy or happy. Hi, Lisa. So glad that you're joining us. And hello, Anita. So glad you're watching. Those of you that are listening to me on Blog Talk Radio, I do want you to know, if you're new to me, that we're also broadcasting on Facebook Live, and many people write me on that venue and say hello and comment on what we're talking about, and that means a lot to me. Thank you. All right. So let's give you an example of hopeless thinking that is about permanent and universal causes for misfortune and temporary and specific causes of good events. I'm going to give you an example of all of this. So let's talk about hopelessness, and then we're going to give you a hope-filled way of thinking that is in contrast to the hopeless way of thinking. So let's try hopeless first. Hopeless says, I'm stupid. So something bad has just happened, okay? And your response to it, and by the way, I put that in quotes, because the truth of the matter is, in consciousness, there is no good or bad. There just is, and it is our judgment on them, which, by the way, our labeling needs to come off. Our labeling is one of our cognitive distortions. This is bad, this is good. That's the way the child thinks. It's not the way the conscious adult thinks. The conscious adult feels like everything is God. and it's all serving a reason, and it's all serving you. And if you're at a rough patch in your life, it is not the end until you work through it and get to something you do want. You understand? Thank you for that heart. That means a lot to me. Same to you. So, a very hopeless remark when something happens that you perceive as bad is, I'm stupid. Right? Let's talk about, and remember, I'm going to draw it back to that line, that despair is made up of permanent and universal causes. You're saying, I'm stupid. It's a pronouncement on you, on your character, on your basic essentiality. I'm stupid. That's a terrible thing. And you're making you and your flawed character. Good morning, Lisa. It is a beautiful day. Thank you so much for liking this topic. I appreciate it, and sending love to you too. You see, that if you say you're stupid, you're really giving me a permanent and universal, I'm stupid in every situation. I'm stupid all the time. There's permanence and pervasiveness. You see what I'm saying? That's what permanent and universal means. It's pervasive. I'm stupid everywhere. Okay. The hopeful response, listen to this, is they find temporary and specific causes for misfortune, for bad events. So that would sound like, all right, it happened because I don't feel very good today. I wasn't on top of my game today. You understand? It's temporary because it's just today, right? And it's specific to this situation and not universal. There's no pronouncement on me if I do a stupid thing. It's about how I feel right now, and I missed that. So what? We make mistakes. I won't miss it again. Do you understand? I hope so. Let's do another one, because I really want to bring this home to you. So we're still talking about misfortune, bad events that you perceive. Here we go. Another hopeless way of thinking is that men are tyrants, or women are tyrants, by the way. I've heard them both in my time. Okay? Again, the problem with that statement is that it is permanent. Men are tyrants. There's no room for discussion here. And it's a universal, it is a universal cause for your feeling bad. Men are all tyrants. There's not one friend in the world that you have that's a man. You get it? That's a terrible pronouncement to put on you. And it certainly shows you a closed mind. Now, what's a more powerful thing to say? More hopeful and a powerful way of thinking is, my husband woke up on the wrong side of the bed this morning. We've been fighting all morning, disagreeing all morning. We'll get through it. That's hopeful. But why is it hopeful? It's because you found a temporary and a specific reason for all that stuff to happen today. Tomorrow's another day. I sound like Scarlett, don't I? But that is true. She was a fantasist. I'm not. I'm saying that this is the optimistic way of thinking about your life. Let's do another one. It's 5 in 10 that this lump that I found is cancer. What's wrong with that statement? Well, it's pretty permanent. By God, it's going to have, I have 50% chance of having cancer, so it's probably cancer. But the optimist says, it's 5 in 10, this lump is not cancer. But I'm going to go check it out anyway. We have to subscribe, ladies and gentlemen, to these two sentences and put everything we say for a while, because this is where awareness comes in. You're going to have to be aware of what you're thinking and saying. So I ask you to drill down to the awareness, and that you don't spend so much of your life in an unconscious state. The world spends its life in an unconscious state. I've talked about consciousness for years. I think I even wrote it in my book, that consciousness is not what most people see. It's what most people miss. And that's because we're not aware of some of these little things that comprise our day. You think possibly up to 1,000 thoughts an hour. Do tell me now what you've been thinking this last hour. And if you can't tell me the majority of what you've been thinking this last hour, which is, by the way, where your life is going to go, because it goes in the cumulative direction that you think, you don't have control of things yet in terms of your thinking and feeling. You see? And we have to get control of that, particularly when we're talking about happiness. This isn't something that we can wave a magic wand over. Sometimes people will come in with an issue and they'll say, oh my God, you cured me. I remember one woman who was going back the next day on an airplane. She came to me one time. I think she still listens to the show. If you're listening, thank you so much for this. She came to me and she said, I'm afraid to fly. I've always been afraid to fly. I panic. I have to take drugs. I just can hardly get on a plane. And she was flying home the next day from Atlanta. And we worked. And sure enough, I heard from her the next day and she said, all of that vanished. Well, you know, I'm delighted when that happens. Really, I am. But I can't wave a magic wand over this without your participation, without your help. Because we always change when we go from awareness to consciousness to enlightenment. We always change. That's the triad. Whatever we brought up in her session made her enormously aware, and in that awareness she decided she was going to think differently, be different, and sure enough she could get on that plane without any panic or anxiety. But this, dears, this negative way of thinking is habitual. You don't even know you're doing it. You don't even know you're finding permanent and universal causes for misfortune. You don't know you're making a pronouncement on your character. You don't know that you're finding temporary and specific causes for good events. We're going to give you examples of that in just a minute. We have to make you aware you're doing this. And then we can change. But one of the things about this is that we don't want to be aware of it because we don't want to change. Now, I don't mind your feeling that way. I'm going to tell you it's not in your best interest, but this is no pronouncement on you. And if you were a client of mine sitting across from me, or one of my healers, one of my facilitators in this work, what we would do is working on your not wanting to change and your fear of change. You see? First things first. We're all in the process of becoming. We are either becoming more conscious and more aware and happier, or we are choosing other ways. There's nothing wrong with either way. One of them will make you happy, one of them won't make you happy. That's all there is to it. But there may be a soul reason you're doing it, but you can confront those soul reasons and say, I'd rather do this instead now. Okay, so let's talk about our thinking, our pessimistic state of mind that gives us no hope, and our optimistic state of mind that makes us hope-filled. concerning good events. Okay? So let's say the hopeless person says, I'm lucky. Something good happened. I'm lucky. Okay? The hope-filled person says, I'm pretty talented in that arena. Now, this is one of the things I want you to know. The bottom line is in consciousness. We make our own luck or our own ill luck, depending on how you look at it. We do it. Nobody else. There's not. We just saw Guys and Dolls the other day. You know, the old movie with Marlon Brando and Frank Sinatra. So cute. So adorable. My husband, who doesn't even get into things like this, absolutely loved it. First 5 minutes he was bored, and then it was like, this is good, you know, and the music is terrific. So you guys enjoy that film. But there's a song in there called Luck Be a Lady Tonight, okay? Like, luck is out there somewhere. I'm lucky. Yeah, just happened to fall into it. Nope. It is your talent, it's how you think, it is the mastery of your own mind, it is you knowing what you do well and playing on your strengths and your virtues and your values that give you the wherewithal and certainly the talent that we're talking about here to make your life something more. Many of us, of course, don't move on that. And it isn't just that we have it, it's the expression of it that is such a spiritual place. We have to move and express this part of us. It's our offering to the world in some way, to the great big old wide world, or to our little chunk of it, or everything is our little chunk of it, quite frankly. Do you understand, I hope, what I'm saying to you? Now let's talk about one more example of good events. Again, let me frame the one we've just done. I'm lucky falls into that this is temporary and specific. I'm lucky. I might not be lucky tomorrow. I won the jackpot with with the lottery, and that was a one-time only thing. That's specific, you see. Temporary and specific. But what's nice about, well, you know, I happen to be very talented in that arena, is that you're saying, that's permanent, that's part of me, I'm talented in that arena. I'm very talented there. I applied myself to it. That is universal in terms of me. I'm talented, if anybody calls, you know, I'm talented in what you see me do, I think. And if as long as I'm in that arena and don't try to do technology, for those of you that know me, I'm really good. Okay. So we all need to know what we're good at and take a certain pride in that. Now, Bible says, pride goeth before a fall. Here's my problem with some of that language. It's not specific enough. Because there's an egoic pride that says, that's narcissistic and false and entitled. Thank you. And there is a pride that happens to do with who you are, that, by the way, also contains humility and reality. You know, I'm here really caring about you all, but I'm just who I am. I'm not everybody's cup of tea, I'm sure. I hope I am yours. We can only offer who we are. So many of us go around hiding it in one way or another. And this is where the authenticity comes in. It's a great relief to be authentic. You don't have to pretend anything anymore, put on masks anymore, sometimes even remember lies anymore. So here's another example. My wife charms my clients. This is also Dr. Seligman's thing. My wife charms my clients. Does that have anything to do with you at all? Does that have, what is that? My wife charms my clients. It's temporary. It's only the clients. It's a specific cause. She went to work for me and may or may not have been successful. But what if you say, I married a charming woman? It's your choice. You did well by choosing her. She charms everyone that you know because she's a charming person and you recognize that in her. That's a more hope-filled response. Do you understand? The reason I'm not using the word hopeful is I'm just trying to avoid overused words. I would rather be, and I'm just playing with semantics here perhaps, hope-filled than hopeful, which you just hear too much of. I think hope-filled is kind of the higher form, the more loving form of hopeful. Anyway, everything is by degrees, and this is a consciousness show where we're hoping to raise our vibrations. I don't know, it means that to me. So people who make permanent and universal explanations for good events, as well as temporary and specific explanations for bad events, bounce back from troubles much more quickly. And they also get on a positive momentum to think in higher thought, more loving thought, more supportive thought of themselves. And again, people who make temporary and specific explanations for their success and permanent and universal explanations for their failures tend to collapse under pressure. Not only do they collapse under pressure in the short term, but sometimes in the long term. They rarely can get the momentum back to do something else. Think of people that lose their jobs. We all lose our jobs for various things. The main spiritual lesson in this is it's no longer a fit, and God's saying, move on, let's find a better fit for you, right? But you've known of people that get right back on the horse and start looking for a job, may even realize that this job is not working out and start looking before they've even lost the job, right? And there are other people who fantasize and aren't realistic and see the writing on the wall and do absolutely nothing about it. And when the time comes that they lose their job, it breaks them. And the more in fantasy you are, the more broken you are. I remember a CEO, I did not work with this man. He divided his company into half. The company is no more, by the way. He divided the company into half. I got one half. He and his team got the other half, his group. Why he did that, I don't know, but I think he was a little worried about me. He was a raging narcissist, quite frankly. I was awfully delighted I did not get him. But who I did end up having as clients were the people that coached him because they didn't know how to handle him. And the truth is, they couldn't handle him. He was not going to wake up. By his erratic behaviors, he was a closet narcissist. That means he did have that soft underbelly, which means that when he finally failed and failed big and he took the company under, he never made his way back. You never heard from him again. The irony is he insisted, he drove one of my departments crazy, trying to make him one of the top 100 companies for Forbes. And he made it. Don't believe everything you read, ladies and gentlemen. All right. I want to go back to the awareness portion of this, because we just simply have to be aware of and then dispute these pessimistic thoughts that cross your mind. If they are habitual thoughts that you've had since childhood, you are not aware of a lot of them. You just simply aren't. You keep in mind that the child saw everything relative to them. So it wasn't that your father was a workaholic and didn't have time for you because he simply worked too hard and had his priorities screwed up. Your mind can't take that in. You say, it's all about me. I'm not worth anything. I'm not worth him looking at, playing ball with. I'm not enough. You see? That's what the child's mind does. So you're filled with pessimistic thoughts. If you don't think you are, you just haven't been listening to yourself enough, because everybody is. Darling, this is no pronouncement on your parents or on you about or anything else. This is just the way human beings are. This is just the way we work. But consciousness is about your knowing more today than you did yesterday, and certainly than you did a week ago, and applying those new lessons to your life and getting a different result, and going on and doing that tomorrow as well. Now, when we did our series on cognitive distortions, I really opened the door for you to challenge your view of the world. If you had any of those cognitive distortions, and I think I gave you 50, I'm sure there are more, but those are 50 common ones according to Psychology Today and Alice Boyes, who wrote that article. It is a very good article. You can find it on the internet. However, one of the things that distinguishes our program from other programs is we try to give you a roadmap to get somewhere else. It isn't enough that you read those 50 cognitive distortions or listen to this radio show. What is enough is the questions that I've asked in that radio show. Because if you got a cognitive distortion, you have to then say, and we want you to be aware that, oh, you see, I'm personalizing. Okay, let's use that one as an example. That was one of the first ones. I'm personalizing. I'm taking things too personally. So at the board meeting, my boss is a little sharp with me. That's the way I interpreted it, because my mother and father were very sharp with me. Hi, Jim. I'm so glad that you're tuning in. My mother and father were sharp with me, so that's what I heard. I heard that tone, that disapproving tone in my boss's voice. That's personalizing, right? Because you don't really know what happened. This is your perception. So there are two questions to always ask yourself when you recognize what you're doing. You say, what's the truth beyond this cognitive distortion? The truth might be, I really don't know what that person is thinking. I'm just taking it in and saying she doesn't like me, but that may not be the truth at all. The truth is, I don't know what happened. Second question you should always ask yourself is, knowing that truth now, what are you going to do instead? I think of this because a dear friend of mine, a colleague of mine actually, had this experience a year or two ago where her boss said something kind of sharp to her in a meeting in front of everybody. And she worried about it all weekend long. She went through, I'm going to quit. She went through, enough is enough. This always happens to me. I'm not enough. I'm disappointed again. Blah, 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 blah. She had a perfectly miserable weekend, worrying about her future, and if she lost this job, what was she going to do? Oh, drama city. By the way, Another cognitive distortion is histrionics, right? So by Sunday night, she had finally gotten to what is the truth? Truth is she didn't know. And what was she going to do instead? She went right back into the boss's office on Monday morning and said, darling, I'm trying to do this with what you said to me in that meeting. What really is going on? Because I think we have a really good relationship. Can you tell me? And the boss said, oh my God, you've been worrying about that all weekend. I'm so sorry. What you knew, I told you in confidence. I just forgot to say that part. And I just didn't want everybody else at the table knowing what you and I were going to work out, because they'd all get their hands in it. And I had to shut you down so you wouldn't say anymore. Wasn't about her at all. Now, how are you ruining your weekends? What are you worried about? That all you need to do is go in and ask. That's a real good example of this. That's why happiness really rides on your cognitive distortions. Again, another little thing that I said last week when we started our series on happiness, and I very much want to put it on the table again, and that is this. I gave a test to my advanced class. It's a test to show how happy you are. I didn't know how it was going to turn out, but I did have a theory. And you know what? Every single one of my advanced students who've been with me a very, very long time and whose lives have completely changed now have all tested extremely happy. So why do they feel happy? They answered the question for me. It's because of the cognitive distortions that are still left and in the way. It's a marvelous way to be confronted with, oh my God, I am a happy person. I'm doing these things. These are the things that are making me unhappy. Now, I'm giving you a lot of keys in this series so that you can be happy. But if you think you're going to be happy without effort, it isn't going to happen. You see, there is always chaos before order. It's the way life works, dears. You can be bringing a new baby into the house, and it's going to be chaos for a while before the new order emerges. A little puppy into the house, chaos before a new order. Solar system's doing this. You're doing this on a molecular level. It's the only way things change. Well, I'm throwing you into chaos right now. You're doing things you need to be thinking about. You can't be habitual anymore and live by rote. It's time to do something else, and it requires some effort. And if you will make the effort, and if I can continue teaching you what the next levels of steps are, you'll do quite well for yourself. But it's time to be more introspective. It's time to really listen to what you're saying and be aware of what you're thinking. Okay. The problem is sometimes, and this is one of the cognitive distortions too, is when people are trying to change their thinking, like I'm asking you to do, they jump into fantasy. They go 180 degrees in the opposite direction. So instead of the sentence, I think George hates me, a fantasist goes 180 degrees the other way and says, I think George loves me. Guys, they're both fantasies. George doesn't love you. George doesn't hate you. It isn't about you. There's something you don't know. George doesn't know you to know that you're a nice person and you're really trying. And by the way, you don't know George either. That's the truth. So what are you going to do about that? You get it? All right. So it becomes necessary to know what your options are, because the options are where the truth lies, other than going to the extremes that fantasy produces. He hates me, he loves me. What? You get it? Now, it takes training and practice to find the truth, quite frankly. And the more cognitive distortions you have piled on top of one another, that influence how you feel in a situation, the more obscure the truth is going to seem to be to you. This takes practice. Let's go back to my friend and the business show. What, she piled a lot of cognitive distortions. She was histrionic. She was negative thinking. She was mind reading. She was personalizing. It was all or nothing. There were a lot of those cognitive distortions, and probably more mixed into this. This is why she had such a bad time. You understand? So when I confront someone and say, well, what was the truth? The truth is nothing more than she spoke sharply to me in this meeting. I was embarrassed because it was public, and it was completely out of character for her. That's the only truth there is, isn't it? It isn't about you being lesser. It isn't about people being mean to you. It isn't, you see, it isn't about any of that. Just what's the bottom line? What happened? The bottom line is just what happened without all the additions of the emotional attachments on top, and the emotional attachments of your cognitive distortions. Okay. Our bad habits of thought, these cognitive distortions that we're talking about right now, came right directly out of our backgrounds, out of our childhoods, from the time we were in the womb. And many of them formed before we were 18 months old, which is when the ego and ego child's mind forms. I'm not going to go into that right now because you'll hear it in other radio shows, and I hope you'll give a listen. What happened in your childhood really has no bearing on the present time, except for your resurrecting the old dead mare and giving it mouth to mouth in the field and dragging that poor corpse into the present time and imposing it on your situation. The present's just the present, but for the cognitive distortions. And there's something to know, to find out. There's more information to be had. There's more to enjoy. There's more to relieve yourself of right now in the present. And this is the place that you manifest from as well. We've all got to, what do I want to say here? And I think his word is good. Distance ourselves from our own negativity and our own negative thinking. And to do this, of course, I'm saying you have to be aware. Awareness, consciousness leads to enlightenment. Now, happiness embraces two very different things, and these are the things that, and this is what I really wanted to talk with you about today. I think this is extremely important. Happiness embraces two things. It embraces pleasure and it embraces gratification. The pleasures are delights that have clear sensory and emotional components. You know, things like ecstasy and thrills and orgasm. Did you know you'd hear that word this morning? Delight, mirth, exuberance, comfort, and so on. These are Dr. Seligman's words, by the way. Pleasures are evanescent, and they involve very little, if any, thinking. That's really important to know. Hello. Oh, well, thank you so much. But how can I turn, I love your show, but how can I turn the noisemakers off? Each time the horn sounds, I lose the for my so hard to, I can't quite read this, to achieve state of serenity. Oh, you're having a hard time achieving serenity. and almost fall out of my chair. I don't even know what horn you're talking about. The horn sounds. Thank you so much for letting me know this. And I don't even, and you're very dear to write me, and this is the kind of thing I need to know, but it is also something that I've got to pass on to my IT people, because I don't hear any horn here, and the noisemakers. So I'm very, very sorry about that. And we'll see what we can do. Jim, I hope if you're still listening, Jim is my IT guy and a brilliant one. I hope that you are listening to this so we can correct that. Thank you so much for saying it might be Facebook. Dear, if it is Facebook, we're going to look into that for sure to see if we can turn this off, because I don't think it's anything that I'm doing from here. But there's a lot that I must learn about Facebook. I'm about to be a Facebook queen, and everybody is now forcing me to get on and do what I have always resisted, so I certainly will. Lisa is saying, here's something for you. It is an alert to comments, and also when you share. And I'm not sharing anything this morning except what I'm doing in this, so it's an alert to comments that are coming in. So you might have just heard one when Lisa spoke. Oh, good morning, Angela. How are you? And Lisa says, yes, it's a Facebook thing. Thank you so much. We'll see what we can do about that. Thank you. And if you don't like that and you would rather just hear the commentary, then you might want to listen to the Blog Talk Radio site instead and forget Facebook Live. You can find both of them. We have a new name for the website, as I said, Martha Novak, NOVAK.com. So thank you, Angela. We are so glad that you did catch the show today. And so go into that website. You might want to change venues, but we are going to certainly investigate that. See if we can turn that mechanism off. Or maybe you can do it and we can announce that, and you can do that on your own account so that you don't necessarily receive those alerts audibly. All right, here we go. That was pleasures that we just talked about. Let's talk about gratifications. Gratifications, and this is a real important thing. Thank you. Oh, you're so sweet. Thank you. Gratifications are activities that we like doing, but they are not necessarily accompanied by any feelings at all. Now I'm going to give you lots of examples of both of these states, and I'm also going to give you some qualifications that I think we can make here. Okay, Lisa says, top right of screen, you can touch the little icon for conversation and turn it off. Lisa, can you describe that icon to me? The top right of the screen, you can touch the little icon for conversation and turn it off. Thank you so much for that, Lisa. If you will tell me what, then I can certainly announce that every time, and we can make sure it won't bother you again. All right? Thank you, darling, for that. This is just out of my realm. I don't know how to answer questions like that, so thank you so much for jumping in there. That's one of the reasons, by the way, that I have such delight in this show, even though all of you that don't know each other actually do, kind of in a way. We're all just here dialoguing with each other, and that makes it enormous fun. All right, back to work now. Okay. Gratifications engage us fully. We become absorbed in them. Sometimes time just stops. Oh, my friend said, done. Thank you, Lisa. Lisa says it looks like a cartoon bubble for conversation. That's marvelous to know. Thank you so much. Okay, all of you that don't like those bells and whistles and chimes and whatever is going on over there, go to the bubble for conversation and turn the blooming thing off so you can enjoy things. All right. some examples of gratification: enjoying a great conversation, really connecting on that level. If you enjoyed rock climbing, you know, which that would not be a gratification for me, but for somebody else it would be. For me, it's reading a good book or writing a good book, dancing, making a slam dunk at a basketball game. If you enjoy any of these things and you're really in the flow, as sports figures say, in the zone, artists use the flow state, that example. And by the way, we're in peak performance energy when we're using those words. You know, I'm very careful about using peak performance the way the world uses it. Everybody's advertising you can get to peak performance. The fact is there's peak performance and there's really peak performance. I've always been interested in helping people win the horse race and not be an also ran, you know. I'm interested in the high levels of your potential and your performance. And it has to do with transcending the ego child's mind, not just giving a business speech well, but really being in that mindset, that flow state, that zone, and letting God speak through you, through that business speech or whatever else you're doing. Could be a radio show like mine. If you are in this state, time stops. It ceases to be important anymore. We lose ourselves, don't we? Our skills match the challenge. We're in touch with our strengths. Hey, Kat, I'm so glad you are watching, darling. Gratifications, you need to know this now. Gratifications last much longer than pleasures. They involve quite a lot of thinking and interpretation. They do not habituate. That means you have to think about them. They're not a rote experience, a habitual experience in life. And they're supported by our strengths and our virtues and our values, by the way. Now, I want you to know the difference between pleasures and likes. I mean, pleasures and gratifications. Because here's the problem. We say we like things, and that one word, we like our pleasures, we like our gratifications, helps us lump both of these words into the same category. You understand? We take pleasure watching television instead of reading a good book that is more gratifying, using our brains to write, if that's our thing, or paint, if that's our thing. Instead, we'll go and sit in front of the television, even though, by the way, a lot of research shows that people that watch a lot of television are depressed. Wow! Really? It's because they're choosing pleasure over gratification. And I'm saying you need both, but we're overbalanced in the pleasure department. There is actually a life pattern called the seeker to feel good. I work with this with people all the time. These are people that run after feeling good. And it's very manipulative most of the time, because to feel good, you got to get somebody to like you, so you're people-pleasing to the max. You're manipulating somebody else so that they give you what you need. So you'll experience pleasure, right? Pleasure does not even use thinking. It doesn't use you. Now, I think pleasure is wonderful. Here's the interesting thing now, and a qualification I want to make with this. It depends on who you are and what your background is. My background is theater and film. I've been an actor, I've been a producer, I've been a director, I've done all of that. So I like to watch television. I do not watch television idly. I'm working the whole time. My husband, who doesn't have my background, comes in and says, how are you wasting your time with this? I can't stand sitting here wasting my time with this, because he doesn't see what I see in a show. I'm looking at what the director is doing, how it's written, whether dialogue's good, whether psychologically it holds true, whether it's teaching me anything psychologically. I'm always open to that. Whether the actors are true, whether they are really bringing this part of themselves up or whether they're falling short. I'm looking for the false moments in things. I'm looking for the truth moments. All of that's really rich for me. So I'm working. That's a gratification for me, not a pleasure. For Michael, it's a pleasure and he wants to be gratified. You guys need to be that discerning to see whether something is a pleasure or a gratification. If you did not write these differences down, you perhaps need to go back and listen to the show. So these are really strongly in your mind, and you can decide what you want to do. Now, I'm not saying don't have any pleasures. I'm saying have pleasures, but not at the expense of your gratifications. And if you don't know what gratifies you, you better go find out. Thank you, Lisa. She's going back to the icon that we turned off. She said, editing is everything. Yes, darling, that's true. So we can't mix up these two words, and you need to have a real consciousness about what you're doing. Are you only seeking pleasures, which are a momentary fix? Here's why it's momentary. A pleasure is going out and seeing a beautiful sunset. It's beautiful. You can really appreciate it, can't you? But the moment it's gone, you don't carry that with you. It's temporary. Here's what I want to say about gratifications. It's something that I used to say to actors. Actors would come into me and they would say, do I have what it takes to be an actor? Do I have the talent? And I wanted to say, in fact, I always did say to them, it's not a question of talent. You wouldn't even be here asking me that question if you didn't have the talent. But are you willing to go down in your guts and take them and spread them out on a table and let everybody who's watching you pick through them and form their own conclusions? Here's the gratification part. And even when you're suffering, enjoy every minute of it. That's gratification. I'm quite aware of it when I'm writing. I'm started a new book, and I'm enjoying the writing process thoroughly. I'm aware of it's very gratifying. But it isn't always the most pleasant thing in the world. Because sometimes I'm struggling. I'm struggling for what the next thing is. I'm struggling for the right word. I'm struggling for this and that. Now, I know how to work those things, but I'm very aware in gratification that there's joy in working something like that out. That is not true of pleasure. I want you to know, too, that while pleasure has a sensory and emotional component, that's not always true in the process of, say, writing, in my case. So I'm writing, and yes, if you were to ask me, I'd say I enjoy it or I wouldn't be doing it. But that's not foremost in my mind. What's foremost in my mind is working through the problem, getting away from it for a little while, getting my mind off things, having ideas pop in my head, come back, try them out, work them out like a puzzle. And afterwards, when I'm finished for the day, that's when the emotion comes. It's afterwards. I feel gratified. I feel like it was a job well done. I sleep well because of that. If your life is full of pleasure and not gratification, it is one of the main sources for not only unhappiness, but depression. Depression comes from self-absorption. I've said this for years. Dr. Seligman certainly agrees with me. Self-absorption is the problem. We are part of a whole. We are part of the oneness with all life. No better, no worse than another part. And if we are running from one pleasure to another without contributing through gratification, which is based on our strengths and our our values and our talents. Oh, hello, Jay, darling, hello. Thank you. Hello from Canada, he says. Thank you very much, my darling. We're so glad to have you on board today. So there's quite a difference, ladies and gentlemen, between pleasure and gratification. Now, I'm going to challenge you today. We won't be talking again for another 2 weeks unless you write me. And by gosh, always write me through my website, marthanovak.com. marthanovak.com is the new website. And we are just thrilled. We'll be posting several things on there, new emails. We're changing everything around and adding to our program tremendously. This next year is going to be full of growth and change and opportunity for us all. So I hope you'll stay with us and we'll have much fun. So I'm challenging you in the next couple of weeks. Realize the difference between pleasure and gratification. Try to have more gratification than pleasures. If you don't know what your gratifications are, experiment, find out, go to bed satisfied. You see? I just saw an emoji go by and I don't know what that means. So write me and tell me what that means. I'm not necessarily in the emoji translation mode. Okay. It's really hard, I want to go back to this, to build a life around pleasure because they're all temporary. They don't give you any kind of lasting fix. You have to generate, thank you, I realize what that means. That's very sweet. You have to keep generating them. You have to get very manipulative and tricky and inauthentic to keep that going if you are trying to get them from other people. And of course, if you're in the nothing but pleasure mode, that's part of it. It's not just about enjoying the sunset. It's about, I need other people to validate me, you see. So, pleasures fade when the external stimulus is taken away. When the sunset goes away, you don't think about it again. And this is true of certain movies. You watch a movie for escape. If it doesn't speak to you on the level of gratification, you don't think about it again. That's a pleasure. It's momentary. Now, here's another thing about pleasure. Psychology has proven that it becomes habitual. I remember a story. Michael and I, no, this was my first husband. This was not my second husband. My first husband and I were in the south of France. And we decided to go out to these two islands, St. Marguerite and St. Helena. And we boarded a little boat that would take us out to these islands. And it was the most magnificent day, as are most of the days in the south of France, particularly in the fall. And we were boating out to these islands, and I happened to say to the captain who was there on the boat, this is the most magnificent day. And he went, ah, as the French sometimes do, very cute. And he said, it's like this every day. I don't know another great example of habituation than that. Even this magnificent day that I was far from taking for granted, he took for granted because it was habitual for him. Now, they have found concerning this, when we talk about that neurons in your brain fire when something is novel. So if something happens over and over and over and over again, pleasure in the same way over and over and over again, and it becomes habitual, the neurons don't fire anymore because there's nothing new about it. There's nothing more to learn. This is how it just becomes a habit and you take things for granted. And the interesting thing is if you pursue this long enough, it sometimes becomes an addiction. Sexual addiction, alcoholic addiction, drug addiction. This pursuit of pleasure. Nothing wrong with pleasure if it's healthy and if there's more gratification than pleasure. All right? 3 things can help you increase the momentum of being happy. Shall we talk about those? And one is what we're talking about right now. Be aware of habituation. Repeated indulgence in the same behavior is what I'm talking about. And I thought that was a good example of saying it the way Seligman said it. Again, your brain is wired to respond to novel events, not to fire for events that don't provide any kind of new information. Number 2 to be aware of is the word savoring. Now, there were 2 scientists at Loyola University. One was Fred B. Bryant and another, Joseph Veroff. They founded a small field called savoring. And savoring is the awareness of pleasure and the deliberate conscious attention to the experience of pleasure. Conscious attention. Guys, what I said before about we spend most of our lives unconscious. When you get in the car and you drive anywhere, I want you to be aware you do not think about driving the whole time. Right? So science would call those times that you are unconscious to the driving experience. You're not there. You're somewhere else in your brain. We often do that when the television's on. Bad idea with all the information out there that we don't want to believe. And we're not contradicting that. I believe that, I don't believe that, I believe that, I don't believe that. It goes in your brain pan, as my mom used to say. You got to be very careful about what you're inputting. Now, I'd like to offer you another challenge, and this is the challenge that I also gave to my advanced class. Find something you savor this week. I think this is a really good thing to do at Thanksgiving time anyway, don't you? Here's mine. I'm going to share it with you. See if you can guess where this is from. Ladies bathed before noon and after their 3 o'clock naps, and by nightfall were like soft tea cakes with frostings of sweat and sweet talcum. Do you all recognize that quote? It's from one of my favorite books, To Kill a Mockingbird. Ladies bathed before noon and after their 3 o'clock naps, and by nightfall were like soft tea cakes with frostings of sweat and sweet talcum. Now, what I want you to realize in the savoring department, you savor when you have a history of something. That reminds me of my grandmom. My grandmother, long since passed, but she had frostings of sweat and sweet talcum many years ago before air conditioning. And I remember her bathing before noon and after their 3 o'clock naps, and she had to dress for dinner. That's very sweet to me. I remember when I read the book, reading the book several times, because the whole thing was poetry to me, and I read it oftentimes out loud. I love these words in my mouth. Now, you may not savor words like I do. You may savor art. You may savor sports and what people... There are many things in this world to savor. We're all different. We're all going to savor different things. But not to savor is a mistake if you're going to be happy. Make sense? So find your own. I remember when that film came out, I saw it, I don't know how many times, 11 times. I would bring my friends to it. I remember the experience of sharing that with my friends. I remember taking that quote out and using it on a voice tape when I did a lot of acting and voice work. I have a history with that quote and where that quote came from. You're going to have a history with the things you savor. Now find them. The third thing that helps your momentum is something that we hear a lot about, but nobody really ever explains it very well, and that is mindfulness. Mindfulness, being entirely here, allows you to see the present moment, as Seligman says, anew, but certainly with new eyes and with a global awareness of right now. As I said, we're most often unconscious. I use the example of driving the car, watching TV. And we have to be attentive to be present. Consciousness studies, and what we're doing here on this radio show, really does make us more aware of what we have not been aware of. That is what the definition of consciousness, isn't it? Being conscious of this moment is not the life most of us lead. As I said earlier, it's the life most of us miss. We must wake up to it if we're to be more conscious people. Now, I've got a great story to share, and I actually want to read this to you because this was in Seligman's book. I didn't bring my glasses today, so you all bear with me. I'm going to try to read this and hold it far, far away as I read it. I thought this was a dear story, though. After 3 years of study, the novice monk arrives at the dwelling of his teacher. He enters the room, bursting with ideas about knotty issues of Buddhist metaphysics, and well prepared for the deep questions that await him in his examination. "I have but one question," his teacher intoned. "I am ready, master," he replies. "In the doorway, were the flowers to the left or to the right of the umbrella?" The novice retires abashed for 3 more years of study. Isn't that cute? Oh, I thought that was hilarious. That's mindfulness. Are you awake to your surroundings, you in them, you as the full participant in this moment of now and of everything? That's mindfulness. Now, let's talk about gratifications a little more. Again, the big problem here, according to Seligman, and I happen to agree, is that we mix up pleasures and gratifications. We like them both. We lump these two things together when they are not at all the same. Separating them and being aware is going to really do a lot to enhance your happiness. Again, gratification is about being totally absorbed in something, letting time drop away. It doesn't matter whether you're puzzled or suffering or don't know. You still find, you still would rather not be anywhere else than doing what you're doing. That's gratification. You know, I'm very aware that when I'm writing, even if I don't, by the way, I'm at the point where I don't know where I'm going now, in my story, I'm very aware of, I can't wait to get back to it and figure it out. Why not? That's very gratifying to me. So where does this leave something like writer's block? There's really no such thing except in the ego child's mind. It's really just an indulgence in the cognitive distortions. You understand? There's something wonderful about the unknown, but the ego child's mind really doesn't like it. But in the unknown, you've got all these possibilities that could go anywhere as the next step. I'll try this idea out, and this one, and this one, and this one, and this one. One of them will work. There is a positivity there, you see? If I believed I didn't have it anymore. I can't do it. It'll never come again. I'll never be as good as another book. Now, guys, that's just cognitive distortions at play. I like this. Seligman said, he said, pleasure and gratification. It's the difference between a pleasant life and a really good one. I like that a lot. Here are some aspects of gratification, some of which we mentioned, some of which we did not. It is challenging and it requires skill. It requires good concentration. It requires clear goals. Now, here's a rub. I want you to realize there are goals with a small g and goals with a capital G, right? Let's talk about some ego child's mind goals. Winning the Pulitzer. Having people say wonderful things about this. Having them like it, like it, like it. Those aren't very good reasons. They're pleasure seeking. Can you see that? They're not gratifying. One of the higher goals from the highest self is being honest in the moment when you're writing. Using all of your life experience, having it all available there like a reference book, and using this piece now, and when it's called on, use this piece, and when it's called on, use that piece, and make it real, make it honest, as I said. That's a realistic, good, powerful goal. So there you go, child's mind goals and higher goals. I want you to always choose the higher self goals. Another aspect of gratification is immediate feedback. But nobody's seen what I've written, and nobody will until I work out some of these bugs and go over it the 50 million times that I always do. So where's my immediate feedback? Most powerful immediate feedback is from you. So I read it. And I like this or I don't like it, and certainly when I've been away from it for a week like I have, it very much helps me to read the whole book again, make some more changes, see if there's something, if I tinker with this, it might influence where I go there. You see? My feedback is the most important thing, but it has to be not based in fantasy. It just has to be honest and true. Am I coming from an authentic place now as I write this, or not? Am I seeing this as realistically as I can, or not? There is another characteristic. It's a deep, effortless involvement. This is what we're talking about. You just lose time and space. You're immersed. You have a sense of control. I also want to say in consciousness you don't have a sense of control, because I very much feel that God is present and doing the writing through me when I am really in that flow state. The egoic self, child's mind self, vanishes. Doesn't belong there in gratification. And as we said before, time stops. Notice in this list there's not a whole lot of emotion. As I said, a lot of times the emotion comes afterwards where you go, yeah, that was a good feeling, you know. But not necessarily. There's no time for emotion when you're listening. You're just in the flow. You know, it's amazing, given all the pleasure that gratification does give us, that people constantly choose pleasure instead. Now, I am saying that I think it's because they don't know any better. Now, you do. And I'm hoping that you will choose gratification, even more so than pleasure, although a nice life is when you have both. But be aware of one or the other. And remember that it is habituation in choosing pleasures, easy pleasures, over gratification that really does eventually lead to depression. We don't want you to have that. I think of a story I've told before. Another client of mine, I told everybody a week before it was going to be a very hard class, and to make sure that they did something very nice for themselves, to reward themselves for going through this very hard class. And a week after the very hard class, I asked people what they did. And everybody had a marvelous experience, except for one person who said that she had made the decision 2 weeks before that she wanted to eat a gluten-free pizza all herself, and she wanted to watch her favorite show on television. So the time came, and she never consulted herself to see if she still wanted to do that. She took her first bite of pizza and realized she didn't like the taste. She didn't want it at all. And she turned on her television show, and it was a repeat, and it was a repeat of something that she didn't even like to begin with. It wasn't a very good show. She forced herself to do both because she had made the promise to herself 2 weeks ago. Guys, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about asking yourself right now, what would be gratifying to you? It isn't always the easiest thing. Okay? Depression, that guys, is 10 times more prevalent today than it was in 1960. And it strikes at a much younger age. I'm watching my time. I've only got 3 minutes. One of my students yesterday, when we were talking about that, she felt like this was partly because there are so many pleasures now, so many distractions. Our tablets, our smartphones, our games, our social media, hundreds and hundreds of TV channels, movies. There's so much more pleasure to be had than we used to have. So we choose the easy route and go there, but that doesn't challenge you. Guys, your gratification comes with learning something new and being challenged. It isn't a happy life if every day is Christmas. It's an indulgent one. And just like the affluent teen of the affluenza fame, who was spoiled rotten and never allowed to grow and develop and see what he could do. It's depressing. So, dear ones, this Thanksgiving season, or whenever you're listening to the show, do strive now for gratifications. Tone down the pleasure seeking and have a happy life. I am enormously grateful for all of you. Thank you so much for being part of my life. I feel like I do know you, and I love you dearly, and I care about all of you, and I want you to have a wonderful, happy, and fulfilling life full of gratification. Thank you, Jay. Thank you, Jay, very much. He says amen, and it's a good postscript. Dear God, thank you so much for this wonderful time and our wonderful, loving connection to each other here. We now surrender as much of this as we can surrender today, and we say we appreciate the here and the now. Thank you. I love you too very much, Lisa. All of you, have a happy life full of gratification and some pleasure, and enjoy yourselves thoroughly, and be thankful for everything you can be thankful for. You are rich in this rich world. You're just perhaps not seeing you are yet, and you are. Be grateful, and may all of those blessings increase for you this next year.
90 seconds.
Now that was definitely for me. We just had the 90-second mark. Thank you so much, dear God, for all of this. We release what we can today. We say thank you so much, and we say this prayer in your name, in the name of the Ascended Masters, our love-centered guides and friends, in the name of each and every person listening to the show. Now, guys, go to my website, marthanovak.com, N-O-V-A-K, and please look at all the offerings we have. Our books are for sale there, but we have our second book on app form for the iPhone. It's only 99 cents. You can buy it through the App Store. And there are going to be so many changes coming up. There are going to be a lot of online classes that we offer, and oh my God, that's thrilling to me, because that means I'll be working with really quite the handful of you and getting to know all of you quite personally. It's a marvelous experience. So stay tuned for all the changes to come, and I'm very grateful for you. Have a wonderful, wonderful week, a wonderful life. God bless. Okay? I'll see you in 2 weeks. Won't be here next week. 2 weeks. Enjoy your time off from me. Bye-bye.